Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode, I feature Tammy Nguyen, a multimedia artist whose work spans painting, drawing, printmaking, and bookmaking. Intersecting geopolitical realities with fiction, her practice addresses lesser-known histories through a blend of myth and visual narrative. She is the founder of Passenger Pigeon Press, an independent press that joins the work of scientists, journalists, creative writers, and artists to create politically nuanced and cross-disciplinary projects. Born in San Francisco, Tammy received a BFA from Cooper Union. The following year, she received a Fulbright scholarship to study lacquer painting in Vietnam, where she remained and worked with a ceramics company for 3 years thereafter. She received an MFA from Yale and was awarded the Lier Fellowship at Wave Hill and an NYFA Fellowship in painting. She was included in Greater New York 2021 at MOMA PS1 and has also exhibited at the Smack Mellon, the Rubin Museum, the Factory Contemporary Arts Center in Vietnam, and the Bronx Museum, among others. Her work is included in the collections of Yale University, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, MIT Library, the Seattle Art Museum, the Walker Art Center Library, and the Museum of Modern Art Library, among others. She is an assistant professor of art at Wesleyan University and represented by Lehmann Maupin in New York and Seoul and London. Enjoy this episode featuring multimedia artist Tammy Nguyen. Tammy, welcome to my Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I am delighted to feature you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Thanks. We have a lot to talk about. When did you discover your artistic passion?
Gosh, I don't know. I think, when I was as early as I can remember being able to pick up any drawing tool, pencil, crayon, or whatever, I think I was pretty smitten with materiality and drawing and painting and everything. So as early as I can remember.
Do you remember the first work of art or artist that really impacted you?
When I was in the 3rd grade, I did a book report on Vincent van Gogh. And that was really fun for me because we made books about different people as a class, so I picked Vincent van Gogh, but then the product ended up being like a little book. And at that time, I didn't know that my artistic practice was going to involve artist bookmaking, but that is an early memory that was, very vivid for me. I remember, drawing a picture of Vincent van Gogh and trying to get waxy crayons to blend together as smoothly as possible so that I could create the complexion on his face.
Yeah, that's a little intense, huh?
Yeah. Well, because, you really have to fight the tooth of the paper to get it perfectly smooth, So I remember kind of obsessing over that, scratching away bits and pieces of crayon and then putting more on. And those types of things were always really pleasurable for me.
At such a young age. Wow. How would you define your practice?
I think that I am a multimedia artist. I think that I am a narrative-based artist as well. I think that I am an artist who's also interested in research as much as I am interested in fiction.
Are there concepts or thoughts that connect your work?
I think for the last few years, I have been playing around with this word confusion a lot. And confusion is kind of like an overarching pursuit or philosophy that I tend to fit subjects into. So, for example, for the last several years, I've been very interested in different ways that flags are used and ships move in the water. A few years ago, I did a project at VCU about the flags of convenience, which is a practice that happens in trading ships, where flags of a nation would be flown that doesn't represent the nation of the ship's origins, right? And this is a practice that is used to sort of take advantages of different kind of tax laws, right? So, for example, many ships around the world are registered under the Panamanian flag, despite having a different national origin. So that kind of a situation is really exciting to me. For the last year, I've been working with a lot of Christian imagery that is, very common, but the particular set of Christian imagery that I was really inspired by was a set of statues depicting Stations of the Cross that I got to see when I visited Pulau Galem, which was a former Vietnamese refugee island. And I was really struck by how prominent the statues were, and also how much I could imagine they provided a sense of salvation for folks who were on the island waiting to seek refuge elsewhere away from their home. I became really interested in exploring sort of the legacy of Catholicism in Vietnam, and just the intense contradiction of Catholicism being implemented through several colonial campaigns in Vietnam. And yet here on this refugee island, it in turn provides a sense of hope. So that is another circumstance of confusion that I'm really interested in as well.
You obviously are very fulfilled as an artist. So I'm curious, if you weren't a visual artist, what other career path do you think you would have taken?
Well, I think that I would really love, I do love writing in a way. I do have a book coming out in September that is being published by Ugly Duckling Press. And, when I was growing up, I really loved English class. I just loved it so much. And I think, I had an English teacher who in high school taught me this book called The Spoon River Anthology. And it's basically a book that is constructed through a variety of epitaphs. And as you read through the epitaphs, you learn about the people in this town and how they were related to each other, right? And that was such a sort of profound way of playing with language and book structure. And it was also such a meaningful way to make symbolism become ever so powerful. One thing didn't just represent another thing, but instead one thing could represent many things that could move and change and everything. And that's just what I kind of remember from reading that book in class. I guess that if I couldn't be a visual artist, then I would want to maybe dedicate more time in my life to playing with words.
What passion do you find in creating art?
I think so. Going back to this idea of like confusion and creating tension, right? And also, I guess it's kind of related to what I just said about the power of language and sort of my my early days in learning English and things like that. I think what I'm really excited by is how something that someone creates or something that I create can just kind of make someone else tickle, whether it's being tickled by a set of, I don't know, ethical contradictions, or being tickled by, two different colors vibrating with such tension, or maybe there is some kind of an image that is constructed in such a way that can inspire an audience to see differently about a certain subject. I think that's so crazy awesome that a visual work of art can do something like that. I also love that it occurs oftentimes in the solitude of observation. And I think that's just really powerful. It's almost sublime or spiritual. And that I just think just excites me and in a way offers me a sense of, internal salvation.
So when you're creating, do you think often about who your audience is and how they feel?
Yes and no. I think that sometimes I think about how, for example, in a painting, I am imagining the visual footsteps that someone might take to navigate the painting. So for sure, if I am working on an artist book, I'm thinking a little bit about how one might navigate the reading space. So if an artist book has multiple spines, well, what does the order of opening those different spines mean in relationship to the story, and then in relationship to how the experience might be felt, right? So in that way, I am thinking about the audience. I'm also, I'm interested in how a work of art or a body of work engages with audiences of different locales, like how my work is perceived in, say, Berlin, for example, right? I'm in the Berlin Biennial right now. And, how is the work being embraced by the different wealths of knowledges of the people who happen to be there, right? That's going to be a different demographic of people that, that are in, say, Saigon, right? Or maybe in San Francisco, where I was born and raised. So I'm interested in that, but I don't think that I'm changing the work for that particular locale. I'm more just excited about how folks from those different places would enter the work or not enter the work at all.
Let's talk about Passenger Pigeon Press.
Yeah.
Yeah, where did that idea come from?
Well, so Passenger Pigeon Press was created in 2016. And, I've been making artist books for a pretty long time. I loved making artist books after a class I took at the Cooper Union where I did my undergrad with Margaret Morton. It was an artist book making class. And at that time, I had sort of gone through all of the different printmaking classes. So I already was in love with every single medium for its different assets and everything. And because I was already interested in narrative, after I learned how to construct a book, I just think that my brain just cracked open, But 2016, it was a year after I had completed a pretty important residency in terms of the arc of my development as an artist. I was just a resident at the Center for Book Arts. And there I learned how to do letterpress printing. And more importantly, I learned how to edition books, which in the before this point in time, most of the books, maybe all of the books that I made were more or less unique objects. And at the Center for Book Arts, I was just picking up so many skills in thinking about how to make work in mass numbers, so how to set up a workstation so that I could edition 10 hardcover books, for example, or 20 boxes and things like that. And that way of thinking really transformed how I thought about the artist book, and then ultimately how I thought about the power of numbers, like the ability to be able to make something and to distribute it because you have more changes how the artist book is engaged with the world, right? It's very different than going to, say an art show and looking at it in the vitrine or in a special collections, right? Mm-hmm. And I think at the time, I was also at another sort of conceptual juncture in that my work had, for the first time, used political material in a very explicit way. At the time, I was working with this military document that I had found in an old Vietnamese bookstore from 1969. And it was a plan to modernize Vietnam, for the United States to modernize the central part of Vietnam. And it was something that I was incorporating into my paintings and something that I was incorporating into another sort of unique artist book. But I felt that by the end of making that, I needed this material to travel in a more democratic way. I felt that the medium of painting and fine artist books was not appropriate for how important I thought this content was. And also I felt that this content needed some kind of a cloak that was a little bit more humble, And so then I kind of conceptualized Passenger Pigeon Press. And the main project of Passenger Pigeon Press is Martha's Quarterly, which is a quarterly subscription of artist books. They're a little bit on the zine side of artist books, but maybe with a little bit more finesse. And what they do every season of the year is they arrive in your mail, and they're always connecting together disparate subjects. I try to collaborate with scientists and poets and policy folks and people working in law, people working in, all sorts of, different disciplines that strike me in that season, And then when I bring the materials together, I try to find a way to create an inventive and experimental reading experience. So, for example, some of the artist books use a concertina form. And so with the concertina form, as you kind of expand the book, there might be hidden pockets inside where you'll pull out cards or pictures. I use a lot of, print on demand or like promotional online tools. Like, for example, I've made like stickers and toys and stuff like that. And I've used things like Velcro or magnets and rubber bands to sort of make the reading experience lively and full of surprise. All the while, the content is, kind of trying to express something that is unique and sometimes urgent. Not all the time, but sometimes urgent.
When you approach a canvas, your work is both abstract and figurative. At what point do you know what direction you're going to go in?
Yeah, that's such a great question and a complicated question. I don't know if I pick a direction, but let's go back to this theme of confusion again. I'm really interested in how the form of my subjects also inspire confusion. And the thing about confusion that I'm so excited about is that you don't know what you are looking at. You don't know what you're reading. I mean, confusion in real life is kind of a frustrating space to be in, right? Because you're like, which way do I go? Where is my moral compass? What is right from wrong? What is right from left, right? So there's this tension in that intersection. And this relates to how I'm thinking about form in my painting, in that I try to confuse the space between figure and foreground, which I think that's why some paintings end up leaning towards, say, a sort of abstract vegetative space, or maybe a very shallow space. Maybe you're looking at something that almost seems like a field of grass, right? And then there's other paintings where the figure is much more prominent, but the figure is simultaneously the mountain or the water or whatever, and then there's other moments where, I feel like I've used this so many times, but where leaf is eyeball, or where, a hand is a sprout, or a butterfly is a helicopter, right? So these shifting sort of conceptual circumstances where the scale is completely confused. The helicopter is the same size as a mosquito. A statue of say, Jesus, for example, is actually filled in with the night sky. Those are two totally different ideas of space and air. And, how can a statue that's made out of stone be filled with the night sky, right? Those types of contradictions and those types of, I don't know, say confusion-inducing spaces are extraordinary to me to play with.
That's great. So what are you excited about right now?
Well, right now I am starting a new body of work inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy. And I am, I'm like at the beginning of this. And what I'm trying to do in this next body of work is, I'm thinking a lot about Dante and Virgil's descent into hell. I'm thinking about Virgil as being this character who was living in a time where, Christianity is on the horizon. So there's a little bit of a shift, sort of like ideologies are about to make a major turn, your sense of morality is about to take a turn. Your sense of faith is about to take a turn. So I am very excited to think about this moment. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make an analogy between this descent to the ascent into space. So up is down. And also the speed is really different. What we feel from the speed of a rocket ship entering orbit is extremely different from how we read Dante and Virgil's slow descent into hell, right? So I'm trying to play with those ideas. At the moment, I'm only just drawing and doing some mark making right now, but I don't in my heart know how to create like an industrial material in my work. Like, I don't know how to I don't know what like a car, for example, means in my world. Like, I've never really created those kinds of images before. And while I was in Venice just recently over the summer, I was able to see some old medieval works of art where there was a lot of sort of like complicated ways to render, say, for example, the halo around a saint or something like that, where the use of tooling allowed gilded areas to have a certain volume. And so what I'm doing in a few weeks is I'm going to the North Bennett School to take an intensive on tooling on leather, which is, a fine binding technique. A lot of the techniques that I use in my paintings come from bookbinding. And so I'm excited to sort of explore how the use of tooling and gilding can help me form industrially made materials in the hopes that I will create my way of saying spaceship.
What does your workspace look and feel like?
So I live in Easton, Connecticut, and if you've never been here, you should come and, pick apples and visit the different farms and everything. It's a very bucolic space. And I live on a property where there is a house, a small house from 1810, and about 200 steps away from this old brown house is a big red barn, and that is my studio. It's a really beautiful, verdant, or very kind of snow white space to work in. And my workspace is, I don't know, there's a lot of natural light coming in, and I always work on my paintings flat. And so there's always like a whole bunch of sawhorses splayed out around with like boards and stuff like that. And on top of them are my paintings, so there's just like a lot of surfaces to work on. Some of them are really large and some of them are super, super small. And yeah, that's where that happens. And then I also make a lot of my zines and my artist books at Wesleyan University, where I'm super lucky to be a professor of art, where I teach printmaking and book arts. So there's another space up there where, I've got like too many scraps to even think about right now, but scraps of paper and pieces of type and silkscreen and lithography. And I do a lot of my works on paper up there too.
This has been a great conversation, and this is our last
Oh my
question.
gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
I tell you, I've been fascinated throughout. I'm like, oh my God. So what do you feel is the purpose of art, and what is your role?
What is the purpose of art? Well, my role is to make art. that was easy. But what is the purpose of art? I've said this a few times, but this, more and more, I'm taking more seriously this idea of like spiritual wealth, and this idea that art can offer a certain space for salvation and solace. And I think that in those moments, the viewer can experience a variety of things. Art can be entertaining and seductive and persuasive and offensive. But all those spaces are spaces of one's mind. Of course, we talk about art, but when we go and look at art, it enters our minds and enters, our inner selves. And I think that is a space that deserves so much attention, especially in this time. And I think that through the sort of, the world symphony of all this art happening, I think that it can serve the role of sort of providing audiences with something, more than inspiring, but something that could be just new to see. And this sense of the new, I'm thinking about it as a sense of feeling like you are alive, and whatever that means on the spectrum of how the art is affecting you is extremely vast. But I just think that this kind of relationship with art, the ability to be able to sort of just have a little bit of that tickle inside of you is extraordinary right now. The possibility to slow down, I think, is also really important and really urgent right now as well. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, it's great. Yeah, art will save us. Thank you so much for your time, Tammy. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure speaking to you. I'm super happy that you reached out and that we made this happen.
Yes. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.